Afternoon, people of Earth. I believe it's July 29th. It probably is. 2020. I wanted to catch up with everybody today, my 4 followers, my 4 viewers. There's a big difference between subscribers and viewers. I've learned that. I wanted to sort of catch up about what's going on in my life. I've noticed that a huge number of people are putting up videos about the rapture. I'm sure I've talked about this before because it's a big theme that I like to talk about. And I thought to myself, I wonder if anyone has been watching the video that I put up about my dream of the rapture. So I went and checked. This is something I put on another channel several years ago. I had a dream of the rapture in 2016. Apparently it was 2016 because I put the video up on October 24th of that year. I assume I didn't wait a year. That's my grandfather's birthday. I don't think that means anything, but it's interesting. Anyway, I had a dream of the rapture, and I'll tell you what the dream was. It's very simple. I was in Kentucky. I'm from Kentucky originally. My family's from Eastern Kentucky, and I was raised in Florida. Still have had, not now, but I used to have very strong attachments to Kentucky. My grandparents' house was, it was like a refuge for me, and I've talked about this before. My house was violent. My dad hit my mother and choked her, and we weren't a very godly family. My mother was a Christian and couldn't get my dad to church at gunpoint. We went to church 3 or 4 times a year, and I always hated it because I really believed that the way church worked was that if you suffered for 1 hour a week in church, you would go to heaven. I really thought that was the way it worked. And I had to get dressed up and, put stuff in my hair, and I just despised church. It was so boring. Church without the Holy Spirit is extremely, extremely boring. And with the Holy Spirit, it's great. It's wonderful. But I never went to a church where the Holy Spirit was anywhere around until I was in my 20s. I was like, I guess 24, something like that, 25. I mean, when I was a kid, we'd go to Baptist churches and Catholic churches and Anglican churches, just whatever my mother was in the mood for that week. And they were terrible because they were so boring. And of course they're boring. God can't be boring. We go to movies and we'll watch Superman or Thanos or whatever, these imaginary idiots that have great power, and we think we're spellbound because we humans have something called suspension of disbelief. You watch something that's totally preposterous in a movie. Like you say, oh yeah, a woman can be a Navy SEAL. That can happen. And you watch the movie and you think it's great. Well, we do that when we watch Marvel movies and DC movies, and we think some guy wearing blue underwear can lift a skyscraper, and we're fascinated by it. And somehow we find God boring, and God created suns. He created galaxies. The power that he has is beyond comprehension. His love, his help, his righteousness, all these things. I mean, how can you not be excited about that? But for some reason, somehow or another, we managed to sort of evict God from church, I guess like around 200 AD. And since then, church has been a pretty dull place. You don't see much of God's power. You don't feel much of his love if you go to a typical church. A lot of people, they go to Catholic churches, they go to Mass. And as I understand it, the purpose of Mass is to keep a good, safe distance between you and God so that you can continue sinning during the week. You say a few prayers and you talk to the priest, and he says, well, you do this and you do that. And then you go back home and you continue committing adultery or whatever it is you like to do. So it's a wonderful device for keeping God a good distance away so he can't cramp your style. And that's how churches tend to be. They tend to be places where, I don't know, people try to earn God's forbearance. They try to convince him that they should go to heaven even though they really don't want much to do with him. So church was horrible when I was a kid. It was just awful. And we were not great Christians. So anyway, our house was not a pleasant place. And I used to have nightmares in the house. Every night when I was a kid, I had nightmares. And I'd wake up, and the nightmare would continue after I woke up. And I'd see giant lizards crawling around on the walls and on the ceiling. And not just lizards, but, enormous spiders 2 feet wide, snakes and huge centipedes. I hate centipedes. I'd see them crawling all over the bed, all over the covers that were on me and stuff like that. It was just a miserable existence I had when I was a kid. We lived in Tampa and Miami. Well, when I went to Kentucky, things were a lot better. My grandparents maybe didn't have the greatest marriage on earth, but there was no choking involved. You never had to worry about my grandmother going out and driving around, looking at the parking lots at bars, trying to see if my grandfather's car was there. So I loved my grandparents' house, and I really enjoyed it, and I spent a lot of time there. So to me, that was always home in my heart. Even when I was an adult, I could just go there if I felt like going up there and staying for a month. I didn't have to ask permission. I just showed up, and that was fine. So I don't know what my grandparents' house symbolized in the dream. Maybe America, because America is like my home on earth. I'm not sure. But I was in this house in the dream, in the living room where we all celebrated Christmas and so forth. And there was only 2 people in the room. I was on the floor, and I was sitting on the. I was on the floor seated, and I had this tray of bug pellets in front of me, some kind of roach pellets that roaches eat and die. And my mother was in the corner sitting in a recliner, and she was wearing work clothes, and she had long hair. My mother had never had long hair my entire life. I never saw her like that. And if she owned a pair of jeans, I never knew about it. She was a very girly girl, and to her, going around in jeans and tennis shoes, it just wouldn't happen. So she was sitting in the corner of the room, and I was sitting on the floor, and suddenly everything started to hum. There was this low-pitched, rumbling sound that shook the world, and I knew that everyone in the world heard this. I knew that without question, there was no one on planet Earth who was not hearing this sound at that moment. And I knew that whoever was blowing this horn that was making this noise was obviously a horn. I knew whoever was doing this was somewhere out over the Pacific Ocean. I didn't know where, but I knew that's where it was. And when I say it shook the world, I don't mean it shook the world so you couldn't stand up. But, imagine being next to a big subwoofer or something when someone's playing a really low note on a bass fiddle or something like that. That's what it was like. Everything just resonated. So we're sitting there listening to this, and I'm thinking, this is the rapture. This is it, because the rapture comes with the sound of a horn. I believe it does. I'm sitting here thinking about that. I wonder if I'm wrong about that, because I know there are certain things that come after the blowing of a horn. It must be. I'm not the greatest prophecy student on earth. I've read these things and I forget them. Anyway, there was a horn in the dream, and it just went on, and I knew it was the rapture, and I knew that was it. Whatever I was going to accomplish on earth, I was done. And I wasn't afraid at all. I've had a lot of dreams where I've died, and I've never had a dream where I thought, oh no, I'm going to die. This is terrible. What's going to happen to me? When I was a little kid, I had dreams where I went to hell. But as an adult, I've had dreams where I died, and I always had time to think before I died in these dreams. And I would always think, what a relief, this is over with. I can't wait to see what's on the other side. And I felt a very sober feeling, a very somber, serious feeling, because it was such a serious moment. It was a good moment for me, but not for everyone, because I was being separated out for something better, and they were going to judgment. Well, that was the feeling that I had when I heard the horn in the rapture dream. And while I was listening to this horn, suddenly my mother and I started to rise, and we lifted up off the floor, and we just kept going. And the weird thing is, this little dish of bug pellets, poison pellets that I had in front of me, it rose up with us. So apparently that had some divine purpose. Somehow that must have come from heaven, and God was taking it back. And I have this idea that what it is, I've attracted persecution in my life. Now, I'm the farthest thing from a great Christian, but nonetheless, I've gotten on a lot of people's nerves, and I've attracted abuse from people who had demonic issues. For some reason, they've always singled me out, and they've insulted me and just generally been obnoxious to me and rejected me and tried to work against me. And I sort of have this feeling that this bait sort of symbolized the way that I draw attacks from people like that, for purposes of God's judgment. So we rose up in the air, and when we hit the ceiling, we just kept going. And when we got to that point, I woke up. And I heard somebody else talking about her rapture dream the other day, and she said the same thing had happened to her. She said she was rising up, and I think she was with her mother too. And when she got to the ceiling, that was it. The dream was over. I suppose maybe the ceiling represents the end of this world, the end of this physical world. Maybe that's where you make the move into the supernatural realm. I'm not sure. I feel that my mother in dreams very often represents the church. And I don't just mean all the church. I don't mean everyone who goes and sits in Kenneth Copeland's church and throws money at him thinking he'll make them rich. I mean people who actually know God, the wise virgins, the people who have the Holy Spirit. I think that's who she represented. And I have this feeling that my dad in dreams often represents pastors and preachers. It's just something that occurs to me. Could be wrong, but that's it. So anyway, that was my dream of the rapture, and it's very much like a lot of the dreams other people are having. And there's two big themes that are present in their dreams. One is, they hear a lot of horns, and another thing is there are a lot of floods in their dreams. There are tsunamis. If you think about it, nearly every flood, when it comes to real floods, real catastrophic floods, most of them, I would guess, are like tsunamis. It's a bunch of water comes into the picture and lifts you up. I don't know if that's what it was like when the actual flood took place, the flood. But if you're in a flood, it's going to be a lot like what happens to someone in a tsunami. When you're in a tsunami, it's not like a wall of water just hits you in the side of the head. You're sitting there and the water comes in from some direction, and where you are, it lifts up, and either you go up or you go down or you stay on the bottom. It makes sense that the rapture would be like a flood in a dream. And if you think about it, the dream that I had was like a dream of a flood. There was no visible water in my dream, but what happened to me and my mother in that dream was like what would happen to two people in a swimming pool if they were sitting on the bottom and someone started filling it with water. They would rise. So it's as if there was water there, but it wasn't natural water. It wasn't physical water. It was some kind of supernatural water that we couldn't see, and we were buoyant. The symbolism of buoyancy and flooding and so forth is a big theme in the Bible. The flood itself represents baptism. Waters represent, very often waters represent voices. Waters can represent sort of the world, because the world is a place that's bathed constantly in voices of demons, voices of fallen angels, voices of people, God's voice. And in this world, most of the voices are evil voices. They're voices of people that don't know God, spirits that are against God. So this world is like a lake. And in the Bible, the Sea of Galilee symbolized the world, and the fish represented people that are drawn out of the world to be with God. And when Peter sank in the Sea of Galilee, it represented people who are trying to maintain their faith in God and their connection to God without the help of the Holy Spirit. You can sort of flounder around a little bit and try to do well. Peter walked on the water for a while, but if you want to succeed, you've got to be in contact with God. So if you look at the story of what happened to Peter when he walked on the water, he made it for a little distance, and then he sank, and then Jesus reached down and put his hand in Peter's and lifted him up, and after that he was fine. And that shows how we're supposed to be in contact with the Lord through the Holy Spirit, and we're supposed to walk on the water of this world. This world says don't believe in God. It says fornicate. It says homosexuality is a great thing, Pride is a great thing. Nudity is wonderful. Women are smarter than men. Kids are smarter than adults. Idolatry is great. People in the East are miserable. You know, India is one of the most miserable places on earth, and yet for some reason we think they have great wisdom that we should learn from. That amazes me. Why on earth would anyone want to? The only thing worse than borrowing your religion from India would be borrowing it from Africa, which is a place so miserable that people in Africa wish they could live in India. Anyway, the waters of this world are it's basically stupid ideas. That's really what it is. Stupid, counterproductive ideas that threaten to drown us. So if you're in this world and you're under the waters, you're in trouble. But if you're full of the Holy Spirit and you listen to God, then you lift up. You're raised up above the waters, and that's what the symbolism of the ark was in the flood. People were assisted by God and they were lifted up. And so the flood served one purpose to the people who were condemned, and it served another purpose to the 8 people who were saved. The 8 people who were saved were lifted, and the people who were condemned were drowned, or, you know, destroyed however they were, you know, buildings fell on them or whatever happened when the flood came. But anyway, they didn't rise. That's the point I'm trying to make. So the flood is like, it's like a sieve. It's like something that sifts out the good and leaves the bad behind. So it's not surprising that people are having flood dreams when they think about the rapture. And another interesting thing about the rapture that God has shown me that most people don't understand is that there's little raptures all the time. There's the big rapture when everybody leaves the planet, but there's all sorts of little raptures that can take place in your life. And I can give you an example of one. Today I helped my friend Alonzo and his wife Terry and their 5 fantastic children. I'm not a kid person. These kids are wonderful. I helped them move to their first house. They have a 5-bedroom house. They left a place called Sanford, Florida. They started out in a place called Liberty City in Miami, which is a filthy, disgusting ghetto like South Central. And they shared a house with some relatives in this miserable, awful house in a neighborhood full of hate. You know, it's a place where you'll see a $60,000 house, and outside of it, there's parked a $70,000 BMW. That's the kind of values a lot of the people there have. Drugs, violence, prostitution, rotten attitudes toward life, witchcraft, voodoo. That's the kind of place where they lived. And then we developed a relationship. Alonzo and I were on the armor bearer team at Trinity Church in Miami, which is run by the Wilkerson family. The people, Kanye West pastor is a Wilkerson. So if you want to ruin your life, go to their church. Anyway, we belonged to that church, and we were armor bearers, which means we were like unpaid, lowly security people. And we used to get together and have meetings, and I would talk at these meetings, and I'd talk about how people needed to be praying in tongues a lot, and they needed to be trying to get free of demons and iniquities and trying to be filled with the fruit and the gifts of the Spirit. And Alonzo would sit there, and I thought he was just waiting for me to shut up. I didn't think he was listening at all. And it turned out he was taking all this stuff in, and he was really interested in it. And over the years, he got farther and farther into this, and his family ended up moving to like the North Miami Beach area, which is a lot nicer than Liberty City. And then they ended up moving to the Orlando area, which is a huge leap upward. And then they moved from Orlando to Sanford, which is less. Sanford, Orlando is still kind of a dark area. You know, it's not. It may not be South Central, but it's not the center of all holiness in the universe. It used to be a nice little small town full of great people, and it's blowing up and attracting the kind of people you don't really want to be around. So anyway, they ended up in Sanford, and they kept dreaming of a house, and his wife Terry, she really wanted to move to the country. Well, they just moved into a 5-bedroom house, and it's between Ocala, which is near where I live, and Sanford. And it's they used to be an hour and a half away from me, and now they're like 45 minutes away or 50 minutes away. Beautiful rural setting, wonderful people. Grocery store within walking distance, you know, everything's right there where they need it. They both got jobs. Their kids are doing great. Their kids' school is going to be 2 miles away. I mean, I just can't say enough about how nice it is. They got this nice house where every kid, 2 of the kids are going to have to share a room, but they really like each other, so they don't care. All the other kids are going to have their own rooms. It's got a dining room and a living room, And I don't know, it's just great. It's just wonderful. And they own it. They own this place. I'm so happy for them. I'm happier than they are. So I went down and gave them a little bit of help, threw stuff in my truck and helped them move it. And I'll tell you, it wasn't even a difficult job. It was very easy. It should be 95 degrees. It should have been 95 degrees today. It should have been miserable. And I was comfortable outside in Florida in July. I got a little color, because that's how I am. But nonetheless, I wasn't sweating. I made a joke at one point about how I at one point felt a drop of perspiration and started to panic and had to run for the shade. Ordinarily, on a day like this, at this time of year in Florida, after 20 minutes outside, my shirt would stick to me. And it's what happens here is you go outside for a while and you do a little work, and then you come inside, you take off your shirt and you drop it, and when it hits the floor, it makes a sound. It goes whop because it's so wet. I don't even need a shower. So it was very pleasant outside. The sun wasn't too bad. There wasn't too much heat. It wasn't too humid. Didn't rain on us, not until I left. It rained like crazy after I got in the truck on the way home. So it was a very pleasant time. The move wasn't hard at all. It was like God just had his hand on us the whole time. We even found a phenomenal pizza place. For some reason, pizza in Central Florida and Northern Florida is fantastic. I can't figure this out. It makes no sense, but it's really true. I don't know how Domino's or Papa John's, I don't know how they make a dime in this area of the country because there's so many good places. But we even found I saw a pizza place on the way to their house, and I was fasting today up until a certain hour, and I told them, this is your payment. And I was kind of kidding, but I kind of wasn't because I really wanted some food. So I saw this pizza place, and I looked it up on the internet, and they had great reviews, and he took me over there to split a pizza before I went home. And the food was wonderful, and the place was so clean, it was spotless, and the people were so nice, and the parking was great, and there was no traffic, and just a wonderful, blessed day. And we had this great conversation. So God has been rapturing my friend Alonzo and his wife and their kids over and over again. He raptured them out of Liberty City, and then he raptured them out of North Miami Beach, and then he raptured them out of the Orlando area, and he raptured them out of Sanford, and he raptured them to this beautiful house where they're surrounded by wonderful people. And I was talking about it to Alonzo, and I was saying, it seems to me that if you're in a miserable place like Miami or Chicago or New Orleans or New York, a rotten, hate-filled place like that, and you can't seem to get out, it's probably because there's something in you that you need to address, because you belong there. God doesn't want to move you to a place where he keeps his nice people, because you just be a pollutant. And I said, I think that's what happened to me. I was in Miami for so long. I belonged there, I was just in need of so much cleaning up. Miami was a good place for me. And then as God managed to improve me and get me cleaned up, well, then he got me out and put me near the Ocala area. And maybe if I get cleaned up a little more, he'll move me to Tennessee, which would be really, really nice. So he agreed, though. He said it was 100% true. He really believes the same thing. And God raptures you from one place to another over and over in your life if you listen to him. So I guess that's what I wanted to tell you is, first of all, I wanted to talk about my rapture dream and how everyone's having rapture dreams. I found out that my video about the rapture dream was private. I made it private because I had this thing happen where I believed God told me something. It turned out it wasn't true. And I said, well, I better make my videos private because I don't want to mislead people about a bunch of stuff. And I admitted this publicly. And so I made a bunch of videos private. And then later on, I analyzed this and prayed about it. What I sort of think is, you can hear from God and be a real vessel of God and sometimes make mistakes about what you hear. And it takes a little bit of practice to get to the point where you can dismiss the garbage and keep the good stuff. Well, anyway, I went back and made my video public again. I'm going to watch it and see what I said. I'm kind of curious myself. But I realized I didn't have a rapture video, a video about my rapture dream, just mainly about my rapture dream. I didn't have anything like that online because I had made this thing private. So now it's public again. So put my name on the list of kooks. I am one of them. I had my rapture dream. I keep feeling that December is December this year is the time. I felt for a while that December 24th might be the day, and then I started to feel like maybe it was December 11th. I don't know, but I've consistently felt like I'm not going to be on this earth in 2021. And I'll tell you something funny. If you're not a Christian, or if you're a weak Christian, you don't hear from the Holy Spirit, you'll think this is stupid. But when I tell other Christians this, they always say the same thing. They say, boy, I hope it's true, you know, because we're tired of this place. I mean, I'll tell you something. I really enjoy life. I just enjoy it tremendously, and my life is very easy. But this isn't where I want to be, you know. I guess you could be an aid worker in Ethiopia or Somalia during a famine and have a good time. That doesn't mean you want to move there. You know what they say about New York? It's a great place to visit, but nobody in the right mind would want to live there. So that's kind of how I feel about the world. I'm having a great time shooting my guns, using my tools, having a great prayer life, you know, fiddling around with my pets. I mean, silly things, trivial things. But nonetheless, this isn't it, you know. I'm ready to go whenever God snaps his fingers. I don't mean that as a reference to a Marvel movie, but whenever he's ready, I'm ready. So it's really interesting to see how Christians react to this. This isn't our home. You know, we're like things that happen in the Old Testament. They symbolize things that happen later in the New Testament. Things that happen in the physical world to the Jewish people in the Old Testament are like things that happen supernaturally to Christians in the New Testament. Did I say Jews in the New Testament? I meant to say Jews in the Old Testament. Well, anyway, so in the Old Testament, the Jewish people, their home was Israel, and that was the only place they had on earth. And when they didn't behave well, God would throw them out. And then when they behaved well, he would sort of, you know, rapture them back into Israel. And this world, you know, the Jews, if you know a lot of Jewish people, I've known Jewish people all my life, one of the things you know about them is they have this feeling of homelessness. They have this antsy, restless feeling. They don't feel at home anywhere, and that's one reason Israel is so important to them. And that's about the natural world and their place in it and how they haven't had a nation, you know, for 2,000 years. It's kind of the same way for Christians supernaturally. You may have been born in a certain country or a certain city or a certain state, and you may have a lot of ties there, you may have roots there, but it's not your home. It can't be your home. So we always have this feeling, if you're a real Christian. Now, if you don't have this feeling, there's something wrong with your relationship with God. We always have this feeling that this isn't where we're supposed to be for the long term. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can say. I'll say this: Alonzo and I were talking while we're having lunch, and we're talking about how God has been taking care of us during this time, this coronavirus time, and this happened to other people I know. A lot of people are struggling; they're out of work, having a lot of problems, a lot of worry. I really think this has been the most peaceful time in my life. I've lacked for nothing. I've got plenty of money. No one bothers me. I don't have to deal with an obnoxious wife or snotty kids or a boss who's difficult. I'm not in prison with guards abusing me. You know, I mean, a lot of people live in situations like this. The government's not too bad. I mean, they're for the most part far away, and I don't have to think about them too much. I haven't had to do very much. I haven't been very busy, and I've just been fiddling around trying to find ways to amuse myself. You know, it's just been fantastic. It's been wonderful. I don't even know anyone who's got coronavirus. And I asked my friend Alonzo, "Do you know anyone?" He said, "No, he doesn't know anybody." And that's even true now. When my county is ramping up, we're up to like 3,500 cases, which is over 1%. You know, the known cases here, it's over 1%. And I still don't know anybody. And our lives have been so peaceful, and things have gone so well. God has provided for Alonzo and his wife. They have jobs. Their children aren't sick. I mean, I could go on and on. Now they've got this house in the middle of the coronavirus epidemic. When it's at its worst in Florida, they moved to a beautiful house. We went to a restaurant today. We were seated. We didn't have to, you know, whatever it is people do now, put on their masks and run in and grab the food and run out. It's just been wonderful. It's just been peaceful. But I've had this feeling that people from Miami know this feeling. People who lived in Miami, people in, you know, Fort Lauderdale, the Keys, there's a feeling that you have the day before a hurricane, and it's not like other days. On the one hand, it's extremely peaceful and calm. Everything's very quiet. It's almost like being in a blizzard. After, you know, if you've ever been in New York City, right after 10 inches of snowfall, and when no one can drive, it's a little bit like that. It's a very peaceful and calm feeling, but on the other hand, there's something very somber about it. There's a sense of foreboding. And of course, that's because a storm's about to come in and wipe everything out, I guess. Or maybe it's because you sense the spirits that are associated with storms. I'm not sure. And I was talking to Alonzo, and I said, I've had that feeling ever since this thing started turning society upside down, turning the world upside down. He said it's the same with him. And there's people on YouTube saying the same thing. They have this feeling that it's the calm before the storm. And it's not an imaginary thing. You can ask anyone who's been through hurricanes. I've been through, I think, 5 hurricanes. It's a real thing, and we all feel it now. But I'm not worried. I'm not worried at all about myself. I used to worry a lot. Even when things went well, I had this worry that I couldn't get rid of. I went to an event the last Reformation held, their first open house in, I can't even remember the name of the place, some little tiny nowhere place in North Carolina. And one of the people there prayed for me. I think I got coronavirus while I was there because I came back and I had these ridiculous, crazy symptoms that lasted for 2 or 3 weeks. But anyway, somebody prayed for me and cast out whatever was worrying me. I'll tell you the truth. I just don't worry. I'm not afraid of the future. I think a lot of people are right now. It's very strange to have this peace. One of the things that God showed me a long time ago was that a couple of things. When there are these stories in the Bible, there are storms on the Sea of Galilee, and in one of the stories, Jesus is asleep in the boat. Everybody else is losing their minds, screaming and yelling. I don't know why, because it's a little bitty lake. I don't know what they were so afraid of, but maybe they couldn't swim. I don't have any idea, but they're terrified. And not only was Jesus not upset, he was asleep in the boat. And then there's this story that says they're out there and there's storms and so forth. And they look out and they see Jesus, and he's not only is he okay, he's walking on the storm. And that told me that we have to be storm walkers. We have to be people who not only survive the storm, but we sleep during the storm. We walk on the storm. So I don't want to sit here and make light of something that's going to be a horror to the majority of the world's population when it does happen. I don't know if it's going to happen in December. I'm just saying it feels that way. It feels like it's going to happen this year. But it is going to happen sooner or later. And when it happens, it's going to be an unspeakable horror to the people who are left here. All the things you see going on now, the Bible mentions famine, pestilence, and the sword over and over again. And we've seen all these things a little bit in America this year. We've seen times when you couldn't go to the store and buy meat, or you couldn't go and buy stuff to clean your clothes, things that people were hoarding. You couldn't buy toilet paper for some insane reason. And we've seen coronavirus, which really is still a very mild thing. You can say it's killed 140,000 people. Well, there are years when the flu kills 80,000. I mean, life goes on. We don't consider that a terrible crisis. A real plague kills 30% of the population. That's what a real plague does. 30%, 50%, that's a plague. We've seen violence and hatred. We've seen the Me Too movement, which is totally demonic. We've seen BLM and Antifa tearing up cities, persecuting people just for disagreeing with them. The George Floyd riots. So we've got this mild plague, and we've got this annoying but not really terrible violence. We got a certain amount of lack, but it's not terrible. Imagine what it's going to be like when all the stops are pulled out, and we've got real plagues, and we've got real violence. People are going door to door to steal each other's food because it's hard to find food. Read about what happens in the tribulation. The fish in the sea dying, a huge percentage of the world's population being wiped out. It's going to be a horror for the people who are still here, and they're going to be here for the most part because they're boneheads, because their heads are like big knots of bone, and they're so proud and they're so in love with fornication and dope and false religion and pride and anger. They're so in love with themselves, with their bodies, with the flesh. This thing that rots, this miserable piece of unrefrigerated meat. I mean, okay, it doesn't go bad as fast as the hamburger in your refrigerator, but it's still going bad every day. You can't attach yourself to this thing and treat it like it's important, because it's not. People are so unwilling to listen to God they're doing it to themselves. They're not being forced into the tribulation or excluded from the rapture. They're making these choices themselves. And it's going to be horrendous. And I don't mean to make light of that. But you know, if you're a Christian and you belong to God, you're supposed to have peace. You're supposed to have joy. You're supposed to have love. You're supposed to have a blessed life. So if I were here wringing my hands all the time and crying and screaming because of what's going to happen to other people in this time, it would mean something was wrong with my relationship with God. We're not supposed to be tormented by these things. So it's hard for me to feel in my heart, you know, the worry for these people that maybe you would expect. But I don't know, it's just inconsistent with God's joy and his peace. It doesn't mean I'm not aware of it. It doesn't mean I don't care. But you know, there's nothing you can do with people who won't listen. You can change nearly anything in the world except for a person who won't listen. God himself, free will is so important to God that he created hell and burns people. The fire of hell isn't the devil's fire. It's God. It's his anger. He chose to create a place where people burn in the fire of God's anger. He chose to do that rather than take away our free will. Free will is extremely powerful, and God will not take it away. And there's just a limit to how distraught you should get over what happens to people who won't listen. I wish I could persuade people, but only the Holy Spirit can persuade you. If you don't believe God is real, if you don't think this stuff is coming, what you need to do is ask God. Don't sit around and try to persuade yourself. Don't read books that present debate and argument. Don't watch people debate on YouTube. Just say, God, you know, if you're there, I would like to know. I'm just a person. I can't be expected to know everything. I can't see into the supernatural realm. I'm not psychic. Presumably people lie to me all the time. Tell me who's telling the truth. If you're there, I'd like to know. I want to do the right thing. Whatever that is, if you're there, then I'm on board. Please help me. That's what you need to do. And he will reach out to you. If you're sincere, he will reach out to you. And he will help you. So you need to get in the lifeboat. You can still do it. But once it happens, you know, the bets are on the table and you can't go back and make your bet over again. You just got to play the game. You got to play the ball where it lies. So I hope you'll do the right thing. I hope you'll do the right thing. It would be really neat to still be here next year at this time for your sake. If you're not saved, it would be neat to be here and know that you've still got a chance. But on the other hand, on a personal note, I am eager to go. I am ready to go now. I always say there have been times when I've had chest pains, like probably from heartburn or something. I've been lying in bed and I felt sudden pains in my chest, and I've refused to pray for God to heal me. God has healed me of stuff right and left over and over. I've had miraculous healings, and I refuse to pray for God. I refuse to say, "Oh God, don't let me have a heart attack and die." I always say the same thing. I'm not going to pray for you to save me from death. I just say, if you're taking me, please save me. That's all I care about. So I don't fear death at all. And I don't like this place, even though I'm enjoying myself. I just hope you'll do the right thing and join us and come and live in heaven and be part of the family and swim in a sea of love all day with people all of whom agree with you about everything. Live in a place where there's no worry, no pain, no disease, no disfigurement. Whatever it is you don't like, it's not there unless you're a really bad person and you like good things. Join the family. There's no charge. There's no charge. I hope I haven't talked too long. I probably have. I don't know what else I can tell you. If you don't like my video, as I always say, do not subscribe, don't watch, dislike my videos, leave a mean comment. I could not care less. I'm just trying to help.